Nuclear energy is an important source of power. Many countries, particularly Africa, have started embracing nuclear power as an electricity source. Russia, which possesses a vast knowledge of nuclear technology, is assisting in many cases and has signed a memorandum of understanding with a number of countries. In setting pathways to advancement and achievement of net zero target by 2060, Nigeria has approved and launched its energy transition plan earlier this year. ETP focuses on emission reduction across various sectors, including power and oil and gas sector, to drive economic growth and lift over 100 million people out of poverty. Joining me to understand this prospect and, of course, the positives of this alternative energy. He is the first professor of nuclear engineering in Nigeria, and also professor of nuclear energy, who works with the Atomic Energy Commission Center for Energy Research and Training, Professor Ganiu Balogun. Prof, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. And let me ask you very quickly that what more do we need to know about nuclear energy in Nigeria? It seems to be new.
Thank you very much for having me. Well, nuclear energy actually is not new. As a matter of fact, it would interest you to know that in Nigeria we have operated a nuclear reactor for close to 2 decades. And when I say that we have operated a nuclear reactor for close to 2 decades, I know what I'm saying. Because incidentally, I happen to be the first reactor manager of that facility, which is actually situated in Zaria, under Ahmadu Bello University. Having said that, sorry, are you trying to say something? Hello?
Hello. Go ahead, Prof.
Like I was saying, nuclear energy is not new to Nigeria at all. We have operated a reactor for close to 2 decades. The reactor was actually commissioned in 2004. So by next year, we would have operated that reactor for 20 years. Hello? I was saying that by next year, 2024, we would have operated that reactor for 20 years because it was commissioned in 2004. And I had the privilege to lead the first group of, I'm going ahead. I have the privilege to lead the first group of Nigerians to actually operate a nuclear reactor in this country. And I was also, of course, the first reactor manager. So nuclear energy is not new, even though a lot of Nigerians are not even aware that we have a nuclear reactor in this country. Having said that, it is actually not a power reactor as such. It is what you might call a low energy reactor. It has all the attributes of a nuclear reactor, if I may put it that way, but it doesn't actually generate power. We use it for training, for research, and for what we call neutron activation analysis. So I don't know whether that answers your query about nuclear power being new in Nigeria. Actually, it is not new, and we have operated a reactor for close to 2 decades.
Now, Nigeria seems to be ready to key in to taking advantage of this as an alternative power. To you, are we really set for that? What are the basics of making that a reality?
What seems to be going on? I'm not sure whether you follow what I've been saying, because you seem to repeat a question, which incidentally I happen to have answered. Like I was saying, nuclear power is not new to Nigeria. We have operated a nuclear reactor for close to 2 decades. By next year, we would have operated the reactor for at least 20 years. That reactor was commissioned, as I said before, in 2002. So by next year, we would have operated it for 20 years. And I don't know what proof could be better than actually hands-on experience with a nuclear facility. If you ask us as the operators of this facility and say, are you sure Nigerians are ready to operate a nuclear reactor? My simple answer will be, we have operated a nuclear reactor for close to 20 years. And we do this under international regulations. And that is to say, we conform to international standards. As far as nuclear power is concerned, there is no Nigerian factor, if you understand what I mean. We have to conform to international standards, international traditions. And the nuclear watchdog, that is the International Atomic Energy Commission, is always breathing down our necks to ensure that we are not deviating from international standards and best practices. So there is no doubt at all that Nigeria is ready to transit from a research low-power reactor to a full-fledged power reactor for the generation of electricity for this country.
Yes, I understand that fact, but I'm talking about more usage for us to generate power. But let's leave that on one side now. What also is the update with our MOU with Russia with regards to nuclear power?
That puts me on the spot, sort of. Let me make very clear that I'm in this interview as Ganiyu, as Professor Ganiyu Ishola Balogun. I do not represent either the government or the institutions for which I work, the wonderful institutions, the Center for Energy Research and Training, Ahmadu Bello University, and the Nigeria Atomic Energy Commission. To that extent, I'm not sure whether it will be proper to go into government policies on nuclear energy and so forth. If you are interested in how nuclear energy works and what are the benefits for Nigeria, I think I will be very comfortable to discuss that. But talking about government policy as far as nuclear energy is concerned is probably outside the scope of what I want to discuss at this forum, because like I said, I'm here as me. I'm not here as a spokesperson for the Nigeria Atomic Energy Commission or for the Center for Energy Research and Training, if you get my drift.
Ross,
so, if I may, I believe that our audience will be interested to know, one, how safe nuclear energy is, and some may even be interested in knowing how is nuclear energy different from other forms of energy.
Now, Prof, I'm going to ask you that
Hello?
question, obviously. As we look at diversifying our energy base, so are you saying that nuclear energy has that kind of benefit that we need as a country with regards to taking advantage of it? Do you think, or would you highlight some of this benefits to us? And like you said, how safe it is. When people hear nuclear, they are scared, atomic issues. So tell us about that.
Oh, wonderful. I think I'm in my element when I talk about atomic energy and how useful it is. Let me try to compare the energy that derives from atomic sources and compare that with energy we get from, say, coal or fossil fuel or even oil. Now, if you have 1 gram of uranium-235, that is a nuclear fuel. Now, that can generate the equivalent in energy that coal of 100,000 grams can generate. Are you with me? 1 gram of uranium-235, uranium dioxide of uranium-235 can generate up to 100,000 amount of energy that the equivalent in, in coal can generate. In other words, if you want to compare with petrol, the about 3 grams of uranium-235 is equivalent in energy sources to about 10 barrels of crude. So you can look at the proportion. So in terms of the waste that we generate, you see that they are not comparable. We generate very, very little waste as far as nuclear is concerned compared to conventional energy sources. What may also interest our readers is people have talked about nuclear energy. What is actually the source of nuclear energy? The source of nuclear energy is very simple. It is resident in the splitting of the atom. Now, what do I mean by that? Imagine you have an apple, and you split the apple into fragments. Now, if you weigh the mass of the apple you started with, and then you weigh the mass of the fragments that you end up with, imagine you now have a differential between the mass of the apple you started with and the masses of the fragments. Wouldn't that be a source of wonder to you? That how come, because we slice this apple into 2 or 3 different parts, the weight of the original apple now differs from the weight of the components. As a matter of fact, that is the source of atomic energy. If uranium-235 splits into 2 and some other radioisotopes, and you now put together all the components and weigh them, you will discover that the weight that you come up with is less than the weight of the original uranium-235. So what has happened to the weight that has been lost? We call it the mass defect. And that is where the famous Einstein's equation E is equal to mc squared. E is equal to m multiplied by c squared, where E is the energy that we have realized, m is the loss in mass, and c is the speed of light. So this mass that has been lost when you split uranium-235 or any fissile isotope is now converted into energy according to that formula, where the mass represents the loss in material, and this is converted to energy. Now, the next question is, how does this energy manifest? The energy manifests in the kinetic energy of the fragments that have been produced. And so the fragments move at very, very high velocities. And because they are contained within what we call the nuclear fuel, this energy, this kinetic energy, is now deposited as heat in the nuclear fuel. And this is actually the source of the heat that we generate from nuclear power. It is this heat source that we use to raise steam. In most power reactors, they are water reactors. We have what we call the pressurized water reactor, and we have the boiling water reactor. Both of them actually operate on the principle that the heat generated within the core from the event that I've described has to be carried away, and then steam is generated. This steam is what we use to actually drive your turbine. And when you get to the turbine stage, the generation of electricity becomes the same as in the conventional method. Once you turn your turbine, there's an electromagnetic field that is coupled to in the turbine and so on. And then this converts the energy, the heat energy, into essentially electrical energy. And this is distributed to the populace. Now, we talk about energy. We don't have enough energy. But there's one problem we don't talk about in Nigeria. That is the even distribution of this energy. Having generated energy, it is important to be able to ensure that this energy reaches the consumer. Our grid system in Nigeria is so weak that it is virtually impossible to transmit energy of more than, say, up to 10,000 megawatts. The ceiling that we can transmit is about 10,000 megawatts with the strength of the grid. So aside from the fact that we don't have enough energy, we don't even have the vehicle with which to transmit the energy and distribute it. So even if we are able to generate the energy, we still have a problem. So as we are trying to add nuclear to the energy basket, it is also necessary to think about strengthening the grid system that we have in this country. Otherwise, we'll still be, even if we are able to generate up to 100,000 megawatts of power, we will be limited to being able to transmit up to not more than about 10%. So the grid system has to be strengthened. Now, let me leave how nuclear energy is generated apart. What are the benefits? And what are the benefits that we are actually even derived from nuclear power in this country already? Like I told you, we already have a nuclear reactor in Nigeria, which is the Nigeria Research Reactor 1. We call it Nigeria Research Reactor 1, NIR-1 for short. We are using this reactor to actually carry out what we call the analysis of the soil in this country. We want to be able to advise farmers as to what kind of crops they can grow in region A, region B, or region C, according to the composition of the soil. So through neutron activation analysis, which we do with our reactor, we are able to actually determine the composition soil compositions in different areas of the country. We have started with Kaduna State and with an area around Zaria. And so we're able to do this neutron activation analysis so that we'll be able to advise farmers as to the kind of crops they could grow in different aspects of the country. Like I said, it is a very, very ambitious project. We want to extend it to cover the whole country at the end of the day, but we are starting with that. Also, in hospitals, the kind of reactor we have is the type that can be situated in a hospital. And you can do some radiotherapy with it. In China, for instance, a similar reactor is actually situated in a hospital. Now, the reason is that the reactor has characteristics such that it is so safe that, as a matter of fact, it can be left unattended because of the safety features that it has. So those are some of the benefits that we are already enjoying from nuclear power.
All right, Professor Ganyu Balogun, that is really what much time can take on the interview today. First Professor of Nuclear Engineering in Nigeria and also Professor of Nuclear Engineering, Nigerian Atomic Energy Commission. Thank you so much for your time, Professor Ganyu Balogun. Well, interesting topic there, talking nuclear energy, saying that we're already benefiting from it. We look at how this would have had to, the megawatts of power that we generate, and we look away from this grid and try to, of course, diversify our energy base.